Today we're going to talk about how to use water-soluble oil pastels. So they look like an oil pastel, but they can actually be turned into paint by adding water to it. So let's begin by first looking at our object that we've drawn. This is a close-up of this flower. And I'm noticing that there's mostly pink on the petals, but I also see this dark purple at the edges and some yellow and some green and also some black pieces. So I'm going to use those colors to get started. I'm actually going to begin with a lighter color because I find it's easier to go from light to dark. And I'm going to start by adding my water-soluble oil pastel in yellow to the middle of my flower. It's really easy to spread out, and I'm just going to be careful around the edges. I don't want to get it too far outside my circle to start. And what I've noticed about this particular flower is that it kind of looks like there's a little bit of green in it as well. So the great thing is I can take another color and blend it into the color I've already used just by coloring over the top. And I'm doing it a little kind of swirly lines because I'm trying to figure out how I can create this fuzzy-like texture that I'm noticing. All right. If it's too green, I can always go back to my yellow and layer more yellow over the top. If it's too dark, I can take my white water-soluble oil pastel and go over the top of it. Oh, and lighten it up a little bit. They break. It's okay. Don't panic. They actually have perforated labels so that they're quite easy to remove and get to the next part, like so. I can just leave that on my tray, but you know what? That's a perfectly good white, so I'm just going to use it. Put it over the top, and what's happening is not only is it lightening it just a little bit, it's blending all of the yellow and the green together, which I actually like. That kind of mirrors the color that I saw really nicely. So now I'm going to work my way out. Instead of doing the black part first, I'm actually going to do the black part last because black is such a strong pigment and it can kind of overpower other things. If I do it first and then I'm coloring yellow around it, the yellow might pick up little bits of the black and it might not turn out the way that I want. So I'm going to continue with my yellow and green. Only I'm noticing it's a little bit more green as it spreads out onto the petals. So I'm going to lightly do some of my green radiating out from the middle. And then I'm going to add some of my yellow to it. Oh, it happened again. This is going to happen to us a lot, I bet. They're fragile but wonderful. And once again, if I feel like the color's a little too bright, a little too vivid, I can go back with my white and I can go over it to kind of blend it a little bit and also lighten it up. So I'm just rubbing it over the top. And right there, I've got a really cool effect of the center and it radiating out with its beautiful colors. Bet you're noticing they're a little messy. That's okay. Sometimes good art requires a little bit of mess making. Let's talk about how we're going to get this to turn pink. And not just any pink, but a light pink. Because it's so light, I'm going to use my oil pastel with a very light touch. I'm not going to color it in super dark because in this case I'm going to use the water to kind of help me out. I'm going to take it close to the end even though it turns purple. And then I'll put my purple, and I'll let it kind of overlap so that the two will blend together. And this is a great opportunity to do one of two things. I could, number one, go back to using a white oil pastel, and I could make it pink, light pink this way by rubbing it with the pastel and then rubbing over the two colors together at the same time to blend them. The other thing that I can do is I can use water to blend my oil pastels together. So I can take my wet paintbrush, and by adding some water, you can see it's turning into a paint-like substance that kind of fills in the cracks in between, and I can blend into other colors around it. I'm going to clean it out just to get some of that extra oil pastel off. And I'm just going to use strokes that remind me of the lines and textures I see when I look at the petal. I don't want to brush too hard with my water because, number one, my brush will get clogged up with a lot of little bits of oil pastel. But the other thing I don't want to do is rub my paper so hard that it starts to look like crumbs are forming. Those crumbs are little bits of paper that are coming off, and that means that a hole is about to appear. So we want to take it easy. Now, this purple is not as dark as the one that I'm noticing, so I can go back even while it's wet and I can add some more of this purple. And if I decide that this purple is maybe a little too blue-violet, I can then go back over the top again, lots of layering, and I can add more pink and let them mix together to make a color that works for me. At this point, I am a little nervous that if I rub too much more, I might see those crumbs. So I'm going to do one last little smoothing here with some white, and then I'm going to call that petal good. I've got some crumbs, so I can kind of gather them up. These are crumbs of oil pastel, not of paper. I'm going to gather those up, put those in the middle there, get those out of the way. And then the last thing I'm going to demonstrate for today is just taking some finishing details into account. So there are these little ridges that I had drawn with my pencil. If I want to go back and add them, I like to add them in the same color as the petal, but just maybe a little bit darker. If I added them with a black oil pastel, it wouldn't look as realistic. It'd look a little bit more cartoon-like. And I want to try and make this look realistic. So I can add ridges like that. And then my final touch, when I'm completely done, will be going back with the black oil pastel to create those little shapes that we noticed coming out of the center. So like that, and like that. And then if I worked all the way around, I would be done with the flower. I like to also use oil pastel, water soluble, for my background. And I know Georgia really loved the sky, so I would probably put some blue oil pastel in the background as though this flower is up against a background of sky. I also have seen a lot of Georgia works where the background is filled with greens to show the leaves that would be surrounding the flower. So I hope you feel prepared to take on the water-soluble oil pastels, and let's get to work.